Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Dear students at Faculty of Commerce English section, second year. We will take today the rent ceiling or the price ceiling and price floor. On last section, we have rent ceiling as an example of price ceiling, and we know that price ceiling is a legal or a maximum legal price, but price floor is the minimum legal price. So when a price ceiling is applied to housing market, it's called a rent ceiling. So when we apply a housing market, the rent ceiling on a housing market or the price ceiling on a housing market, it's called rent ceiling. So rent ceiling or price ceiling is always below the equilibrium rent. So we will put a maximum legal price below equilibrium rent. This will create three things. First one, a housing shortage. Second one, increased search activity. Third one is black market. And we will take every case. So as a housing shortage, and we know the definition of shortage is that quantity demanded is larger than quantity supplied, which is due to a rent ceiling, which is under or below equilibrium. Second thing is increasing in search activity, which means that we are doing search activity, we are searching for the product, but we can't find it. We search it during or using the legal ways. When we use the illegal way, it's called the black market. So when we put a price ceiling or put a rent ceiling, we have a shortage, we have increasing search activity, we have a black market. With a housing shortage in a housing market, a housing shortage or a housing market is a market, whereas the product is apartment, and we will have the rent at equilibrium level, which means that the quantity of housing supplied equals the quantity of housing demanded, so there is no shortage or surplus, so we are at equilibrium state. But we will put a legal price and the government puts a legal price below the equilibrium rent, which means the rent ceiling, so the quantity of housing demanded exceeded the quantity of housing supplied, so there is a shortage. But if rent ceiling is set below the equilibrium rent, if we set a rent ceiling below equilibrium rent, this will be a shortage of housing, a shortage of housing. So first, we have no shortage or surplus. Second, we have a shortage of housing due to putting a rent ceiling. Then, when there is a shortage, the quantity available is the quantity supplied. And somehow this quantity must be allocated among the frustrated demanders. So when we are in a shortage state, that means that the quantity available is less than the quantity supplied or less than quantity demanded by consumers, which mean we have many demanders, but we have less quantity available, which will cause a shortage. So one way in which this allocation occurs is through increasing search activity. So we have an activity in order to reach this product or this good in order to reach this apartment, we have increasing search activity. And we will define the search activity. And search activity, it's related to time spent looking for someone with whom to do business. بفضل أدور على حد عشان أوصل له عشان أقدر أعمل معاه شغل. In some markets, such as housing market, people spend a lot of time checking the alternative available before making a choice. So before making a choice, we take some time to discuss the alternative available or to choose between alternatives available. So we will have a price regulated and there is a shortage, search activity increasing. We have increasing search activity because a price is regulated and there is a shortage. The opportunity cost, which we will take the last section, we talk about opportunity cost and we know that the slope of the PPF is the opportunity cost. And also, when we talk about opportunity cost of a good is equal not only to its price, but also to the value of the search time spent. The opportunity cost of this good is not equal only to its price, but also the value of the search time spent finding the good. So we are taking a lot of time in order to search or look for this good, which means that the opportunity cost of housing is equal to the rent plus the time and other resources spent searching for the restricted quantity available. So we talk about time, we talk about the rent and other resources, which mean by opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is related to economics. So search activity is costly. It uses what? Time and other resources such as phone calls, automobiles, gasoline that could be used in other productive way. I could have used these resources efficiently. I could use my phone calls in other ways. I could use my automobile in more productive way. أقضي بيها مشاوير، أبدأ إن أنا أتحرك سفر، الحاجات دي كلها أقدر إن أنا أعملها عن طريق إن أنا أبدل السيرش activity which is costly and uses time and other resources. So rent ceiling controls only the rent portion of the cost of the housing. So rent ceiling أو سقف الإيجار يتحكم فقط في نسبة الإيجار من التكلفة. بس أنا عندي تكلفة السيرش activity. Search activity is costly, but in case of rent ceiling, we have increasing search activity. We have more costs. So the cost of increased search activity might end up making the full cost of housing higher than not only the equilibrium, not only the equilibrium state, but it will be higher than equilibrium, which we will call a black market price. So لازم تركز في الجزئية دي على جزئية ال alternatives ال available searching activity, the cost of increasing search activity, and the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost, which is not only the price, but also to the value of the search time spent. So the cost of increased search activity might end up making the full cost of the housing higher than it would be without a rent ceiling. Then we have a black market. And a black market, we will have a rent ceiling. One of the affection of the rent ceiling is the black market. A black market is illegal, and illegal trading because of the rent ceiling that encourages illegal trading in black market, an illegal market in which the equilibrium price exceeds the price ceiling. So we have a new equilibrium price which exceeded the legal price, which is the rent ceiling. And black market occur in rent controlled housing. So when we have a rent controlled housing, we have a black market. Any market with a rent ceiling or with a price ceiling have a black market. So when a rent ceiling enforced, frustrated renters and landlords constantly seek ways of increasing rents, and the level of black market rent depends on how tightly the rent ceiling is enforced. So when I lose enforcement, the black market rent is close to the unregulated rent. So unregulation price or unregulated rent is when we have the black market. At the end, the black market rent is equal to the maximum price that the renter is willing to pay. So maximum price that the renter is willing to pay, it's called the black market rent or black market price. So we had the black market, we had the shortage, and we had the surge activity. We will represent them graphically, and I want you to focus with me with this section. So in this graph, we had the supply curve and the demand curve. With no price ceiling, we have no price ceiling, we have here an equilibrium, and the point of equilibrium is represented by this point. So here we have equilibrium price, and we have equilibrium quantity, and we call this point of intersection is equilibrium point. We had here no surplus and no shortage. We had here the consumer surplus is at the best amount, and producer surplus is at the best amount. And the area of consumer surplus, the area of consumer surplus is this area. This area is represented by consumer surplus. It's the area that is above equilibrium. So it's above equilibrium, and at the same time, it's below demand curve. So above equilibrium, below demand curve, which is this area, we called it consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is the difference between the price that is willing to pay or is able to pay minus the price he actually paid, which represented by this area. So here we have P0, and we have here quantity 0. So we have quantity 0 and price 0. If I or the government set a rent ceiling, so here I set a rent ceiling, and the rent ceiling is represented by a line under the equilibrium point, which show a price that is lower than the equilibrium price. So this price is the price lower than equilibrium price. Here, as shown, that we have larger quantity demanded, we have here a larger quantity demanded and a less quantity supply, so we have a shortage which is represented by this area. We have a shortage amount. But at the same time, when we put a price ceiling, we have two areas. We have illegal area we have here illegal area, which is the area above the price ceiling. So the area above the price ceiling, it's all of this area. So all of this area is illegal area because the price that is put by the government or the price ceiling is the price which is lower than the equilibrium. So as shown that we have a less producer surplus. As we say that this area represents the consumer surplus, and this area represent producer surplus. Producer surplus. So we have two areas. We have consumer surplus, and we have producer surplus. So when we put a rent ceiling, we force a black market, which is not the equilibrium, but it will be even larger than equilibrium. It will be represented by this line. So this line is the black market price. So when we have a black market price, which is represented by this point, which we will call P black market, represented by red. So P black market, or the price of the black market or black market price, will make the producer surplus and consumer surplus, and consumer surplus shrinks to the minimum area. So we have consumer surplus shrinks, producer surplus shrinks. And we have this area, this rectangular area, and this triangle area. This triangle area, we called it deadweight loss. Deadweight loss. This area called deadweight loss. And we have this area, which is called increasing cost. For search activity. Increasing costs for searching activity. So this area will represent, will have it in the Red, this area will represent the dead weight loss, and this area dead weight loss, and this area is the increasing search cost, and we have the new producer surplus, which be represented by this blue area. So here we have consumer surplus, it's the area below demand curve above equilibrium, and that is the new equilibrium price, which called black market. And we have producer surplus, it's the area above supply curve below equilibrium price. And we have increasing search activity represented by this rectangular, and we have a dead weight loss represented by this triangle. So back to our port, we here have an equilibrium point of 1,000 and 80,000 unit for $1,000. So that is the rent equilibrium or the point of equilibrium in rent. We have a rent ceiling, and the rent ceiling is below equilibrium price. It's below equilibrium price. This is the rent ceiling. So all the area above the rent ceiling, we can call it illegal region. So the legal region is the area below rent ceiling. So the area below rent ceiling it's called legal region, and area above rent ceiling it's called illegal region. So demand curve it's represented by the consumers that won't have rent, and supply curve for consumers or for producers or house owners who supply units or apartments. So we will have a price ceiling of $800. This will represent in three things. First, we have a shortage of 40,000 unit, and we have a maximum black market price, and we have the area of this rectangular, which represented by increasing search activity or increasing cost of search activity. So we talk about inefficiency of rent ceiling. Of course, rent ceiling is inefficient because we have a price below the equilibrium rent will lead to inefficient underproduction of housing services. The marginal social benefit or MSB from housing services exceeded the marginal social cost, and a deadweight loss arises. So a deadweight loss arises because the marginal social benefit exceeded the marginal social cost. And we have inefficiency because a rent ceiling decreases the quantity of housing supplied to less than the efficient quantity. A deadweight loss arises, producer surplus shrinks, consumer surplus also shrinks. There is potential loss from increasing search activity. So we have here the final figure of the rent ceiling. So this figure shows a rent ceiling of $800 per month is below the equilibrium rent 1,000 per month, and the quantity of housing supplied 60,000 unit is less than the efficient quantity 80,000 unit. So we here have a 60,000 unit quantity And here we have the equilibrium point, which is the intersection between the demand curve and supply curve. We have equilibrium price of 1,000 and we have equilibrium quantity of 80,000. When we put a price ceiling below equilibrium, which is $800, we have a quantity supplied of 60,000 and a quantity demanded of 100,000, which will lead to a shortage of 40,000. Number two, we have increasing costs from searching activity, which are represented by this area, this rectangular, and we have a dead weight loss due to the underproduction. The supplier can produce 80,000 units, but he actually produces 60,000 units due to the less prices. And then we have consumer surplus shrinks and producer surplus shrinks. We have consumer surplus of this area, triangle. Before, the consumer surplus was this area. If we have a line here and this area, this rectangular, was the consumer surplus, and this area was the producer surplus. But because of the rent ceiling, producer surplus shrinks and consumer surplus shrinks. Deadweight loss arises, potential loss from housing surge, and that was the rent ceiling. Next section, we will have the price floor and the minimum wage as a very important application. Thanks for your attention.